Lava and Kitai Tele for joining this webinar on integrity. If we could all bow our heads so I could say our opening prayer. Tato ifo ma tatalo, liatua lo mato tama, mato te whaawitai I lo lofa mo I mato I asauma, whaawitai mo o wha manawianga e tele, mato te whaawitai po'i mo lo to a filimu. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for bringing us all together today. Integrity is closely intertwined with our Pacifica culture, and I pray this webinar provides value to our participants on the importance of integrity and guides how we work with integrity in all that we do, wherever we are. Thank you once again for this chance to share and connect with each other. Amen.
Thank you, Hannah, for opening our time together with prayer. We've really enjoyed having you join our team over the last few weeks with our Pacifica intern, and thank you for your contributions to our work, both to our office and also for setting the tone for today's session. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou, no mai haere mai, warm Pacific greetings to everyone that's joined us. My name's Sarah Markley. I'm the Director of International Engagement at the Office of the Auditor-General and the Deputy Secretary-General of PASAI, the Pacific Association of Supreme Audit Institutions. I welcome everybody today, but particularly our Supreme Audit Institution colleagues and also Pacific Region Ombudsmen, the members from the Parliamentary Legislative Committees, our Public Service Commissioner colleagues, regional development partners, and others working in the public service and civil society organisations throughout the Pacific. It's great to have you all with us today. I'd like to let you know that we are recording this webinar, so it can be used in the future for work with PASAI, and it will be made available to you after the session as well. So thank you for joining the session today. This is our continuing webinar series focused with the overarching theme of integrity in public sector systems. Today, we'll be speaking with Roy Lagolago, who is the head of PACER Plus Implementation Unit, an organisation in Samoa focused on supporting PACER Plus countries in the implementation of the PACER Plus trade agreement. The Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations Plus, or PACER Plus, it's a unique trade agreement that reduces trade barriers in our region and makes it easier for businesses to operate in the Pacific. With an extensive background in law enforcement, security, intelligence, investigations, and trade, Roy previously led the Oceania Customs Organisation, negotiating MOUs to support Pacific trade and security. He's born and raised in Samoa and holds degrees in criminology, sociology, and public management from Victoria University in New Zealand. In today's session, we're going to hear the role that Roy and his team at PACER Plus play to support good governance, integrity, and accountability in our region. Roy's going to share about the importance of transparency and building public trust when it comes to realising sustainable and inclusive investment, trade, and economic growth initiatives in the Pacific region. Today's panel will help us to see how we're allies in seeking to enact change for good public management. Much of the discussion is transferable into other parts of the public sector. The challenges that all of us face that are gathered here today will be considered today, and we hope that there will be content that all of you can take away and apply into your own situations. At this stage, I'm going to pass over to John Ryan, the Auditor-General of New Zealand and Secretary-General of PASAI, who's going to lead our discussion today. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Sarah. Malo le safoya. Warm Pacific greetings, I think I should say, although it's from a very cold and un-Pacific looking Wellington when I look out the window, and I think our reputation is that that's always like the weather's like, but I'd like to say yesterday it wasn't too bad, so there you go. It's very nice to be here and to just welcome you again, all those online, those joining for the first time, a special welcome to you, and of course, welcome back for those of you that have been on different seminars with us in the past. It's been really encouraging to have the attendance at these seminars, and also the conversation and the sort of insights we get from them. So we certainly enjoy hosting them, and we hope you enjoy being part of them, and look forward to being part of today as well. I'm John Ryan. I'm the Auditor-General here in New Zealand, and I'm also the Secretary-General of PASAI, and PASAI has 30 members across the Pacific, from the north, the Guams of the world, through to the south, and everywhere in between, and pretty much all the Australian states are now part of PASAI as well, and the French territory. So a pretty comprehensive group of Auditors General, and our mission, if you like, in PASAI is to strengthen performance, transparency and accountability across the Pacific by working in the development of the roles of Auditors General. Our theme is, as PASAI, is about us working together, learning from each other, and there's an awful lot that even developed SIs can learn from each other, but also from developing SIs and the challenges they face. And it's very much the theme for today, actually, that we all can learn from each other, and in particular today from fellow travellers in the Pacific concerned about integrity issues. And I think all of us on this webinar are at least interested and mostly concerned about, in our own jobs, how we build integrity in Pacific nations, including New Zealand and Australia. So whawhatai tale lava for joining us today, Roy. It's a great honour to have you here. I was a little bit worried when I heard Sarah ring out your CV, that I'm always worried when there's someone with a criminology and sociology degree that they can see right through me, and I feel nervous talking to you. But it's great that you could be here, and your team, I think, is joining us as well. So look, I might just hand it over to you just to do some introductions, and also to perhaps just explain for those that don't know the role of PACER Plus and the Pacific, and your role.
Yeah, kia ora, and thank you, John, whawhatai lava, for the introduction, and talofa lava, everyone, and warm Pacific greetings to all our brothers and sisters from around the region. Mahalo Albito for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. Also, thank you to the Office of the Auditor General New Zealand to join in your team. Also the PASAI Secretariat, but also want to make a big shout out, korava, to Angela, who worked behind the scenes to pull all of this together. So thanks for that, Angela. But look, PACER Plus is the treaty agreement that's been signed by, that's been ratified by 10 Pacific countries. And as part of the implementation of the agreement, parties wanted to set up an organization to help with the implementation of activities under PACER Plus. And so that's where we, PACER Plus Implementation Unit and the Labour Mobility Secretariat, were established. So our specific role is to implement activities for parties under the treaty agreement known as PACER Plus. So that's sort of the role that we play as the organization that undertakes the support for parties. Alongside me at the moment is Mr. Alipate Tavo. He's our trade advisor, senior trade advisor, based here at the implementation unit, and we're based in Samoa. We have a small team. There's about 8 of us that manage quite a substantial work program for parties. We have our governance structure is we have PACER Plus ministers. Then we have our joint committee, which is all our senior officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. That's who our organization reports to. Then we also have the various subcommittees that look after the various components of what we actually do under PACER Plus. But perhaps, John, if I could just hand it over to Alipate, he can share a bit more on some of the elements in relation to PACER Plus. So maybe Wame, if you can put up the presentation, please.
Thank you, Roy. Just to provide very brief background on the Pacific Agreement Close Economic Relations Plus, or PACER Plus, and how the PACER Plus implementation unit links into that agreement. Just briefly, PACER provided the framework for this cooperation by all the forum member countries. So once all these PACER or the forum member countries decided to start the discussions on forming this regional economic integration, it took some time. The negotiations went back to 2008, 2009, and it took a while before the agreement was agreed by some countries, and 11 countries signed the agreement in 2017, and this was done in Tonga, and it required 8 countries to ratify the agreement before it entered into force. So it took another 3 years for the first 8 countries to ratify the agreement through the approval process, going through cabinet and parliament. So it finally came into force in December of 2020. And right now we have 10 parties that have ratified the PACER Plus agreement, which includes Australia, Cook Islands, Kiribati, New Zealand, Niue, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. So these are the only countries that have ratified the agreement. Nauru is also a signatory, but it's still going through their ratification process. The agreement, the objective of the agreement, of course, like any other trade agreement, is to raise the living standards of its people, create jobs, focusing on the people that are unemployed, and of course increase exports from the Pacific Island countries to Australia and New Zealand, the bigger markets, and also within forum island countries. While at the same time, they aims to lower barriers to trade and provides greater certainty for businesses that operate in this 10-country membership scope. The agreement covers trading goods, trading services, and investment. This is the very first time that the Pacific Island countries have entered into an agreement that includes trading services and also investment. These are all legally binding commitments from countries, and also it includes a side arrangement on labor mobility as well. So all the seasonal work that's going on in Australia and New Zealand, there's arrangement by the member countries to have a platform so they can come and talk about any issues that arise, and also how to resolve all those issues in that platform. The agreement also includes a development cooperation chapter. This is where it can facilitate the provision of assistance to all the member countries through this work is done through the PACER Plus implementation unit. So these are the core elements of the agreement: trading goods. Under trading goods, it covers all the tariff commitments. When I refer to tariff, I'm talking about import duty that's charged at the border. It also includes rules of origin components, customs procedures, ways to improve or facilitate trade at the borders, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. This relates to all the biosecurity work that quarantine departments are doing at the border. And of course, also includes technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment procedures. And this is related to all the goods that have been processed and value addition are included. Under trading services, this includes a lot of different sectors in the services industry and subsectors going from finance, logistics, distribution, tourism, and all the different sectors in any economy. And the main purpose is to improve and harmonize the regulations, the enabling environment, so that when services are provided, it's harmonized throughout, and there's no surprises. Everything is transparent, and that businesses can be allowed to come and establish in all these various countries. So all the member countries to PACER Plus have specific schedules of commitments and the services component. And of course, investment. The whole intention is to attract investment into the Pacific. There are so many areas where investment is needed, including where genuine investors to come and invest in the Pacific. And a lot of work has been looking at all the enabling environment, the framework, and investment promotion and awareness. And of course, the last one, which is the side arrangement, which is labor mobility, looking at how we can help out all these countries that need workers, not only sending workers to Australia and New Zealand, also countries like Niue and Cook Islands that have a shortage of labor of workers at the national level. All these issues are discussed on these annual forums, and solutions are implemented. Next slide, please, woman. What exactly did we do at the Business Representation Unit? We work with all the member countries to deliver and manage annual work program and budget that has been approved on an annual basis. So we develop all these activities that are all linked to all the different components of trading goods, services, investment, and labor mobility. We also monitor. We monitor closely the implementation of all these activities to make sure that objectives are being achieved, and also to evaluate and learn and adapt as we go through these various issues that arise from the countries. And of course, we develop regional mechanisms for effective cooperation with other agencies within the region. And we also provide policy advice and technical support directly to the parties through all these various coordination mechanisms that we have in place. Next slide, please. Okay, capacity building across all the different value chains. These are the areas where we provide our support. Of course, looking at all the regulatory policy reforms that are required, following international best practices, and all the different legal requirements from the agreement. So these will be provided to the countries who are working with consultants, or what we call short-term advisors, when required. In terms of automation, we've been providing a lot of support to the countries at the border, especially with customs and biosecurity, with trade facilitation using systems to make everything more efficient, more effective, and cuts down on challenges of doing things manually where there are errors, and also to collect good information from this automation of processes and procedures. Two examples that I can provide that's linked to automation throughout the Pacific is the work that we've been doing with UNCTAD to develop this customs management system that we call the Asikura World. And this system automates all the different customs processes, even up to electronic payment. And all the trade, import, and export are recorded, and information and data are more correct in a way, and all the compared to the manual processes that some countries are still doing. In terms of investment promotion, We work directly with agencies on the ground to develop their capacity in order to attract more investors, and also to provide the information that investors need and require to be able to come and invest in the Pacific. Testing in food safety, of course, a lot of products that are being produced in the Pacific have not met the market requirements in Australia, New Zealand, and other more developed countries. So we provide this support on the ground, provide the private sector to get their products, add value to the normal agricultural produces that they normally export, like taro and cassava and so forth, cocoa. So we provide the support in terms of testing, of course, food safety, and all those various technical requirements. We also provide broader related equipment. This enables the private sector to be able to export and treat their products before it goes out. So this includes treatment facilities, which is related to biosecurity. For example, irrigation of watermelon, and of course taro and all these agricultural produces that requires treatment at the border before it goes into Australia and the New Zealand market. Support development of science-based SPS measures and compliance of these exporters, the farmers, and all the manufacturing businesses, getting their facilities up to par with the market requirements. And of course, e-commerce plays a big role as we're in the digital era right now, and businesses are working a lot on using e-commerce to facilitate their trade, not only with exports, also imports, and of course, a lot of the different sectors like tourism and the logistics that all use e-commerce. So this little diagram just shows the value chain, how we provide capacity building in terms of all the raw materials to the farmers. We go link it up to all the very remote areas, the farmers associations, and how to get their produce to the market overseas, especially Australian and New Zealand requirements. Work with the producers and processors of agricultural produce, looking at cocoa exports. We test the cocoa, look at all the nutritional information and meeting the requirements from the markets. And of course, the exporters facilitating all the logistics requirements in terms of freight, customs procedures, any requirement from biosecurity, pest control, and all these crop surveys. We're looking into provide support to the countries. And of course, when it gets to Australia and New Zealand, to the consumers and other countries within the Pacific, when there's internal trade within the Pacific, member of PACER Plus member countries. Next slide, please, Wame. This is our PPRU or our governance system. Maybe after this slide, I'll just pass it back to Roy. So we've got this the governing body, which we call the Joint Committee. We've got the budget subcommittee on the side. We've got all these various subsidiary bodies and our focal point. So all the different elements or components of PACER Plus. Goods, we've got a committee on goods, we've got committees on customs, I've got a committee for SPS, biosecurity, and the technical barriers to trade standards, we've got another committee for that. So that's they're all linked up to the focal point. And then, of course, the budget subcommittee on the side. We've got the implementation unit in the middle there, which we also work with other regional, international organizations. You name them all. We do work with them and we liaise with them, especially with developing our activity plans and also in terms of monitoring plan. We work, of course, there's a link with the private sector, civil society, and NGOs. Maybe I'll just stop there. Give it back to you, Roy. Thank you.
There's nothing else to add. I'll hand it back to you, John.
Well, thank you, Alapati and Roy. First of all, a massive span of responsibility in there. You know, if you look at that value chain that you put up, you're really going right from, you know, the beginning of production through to markets, and that's a massive task. And as you pointed out in that last slide, and a large number of interface points, you know, with private sector, with industry, with presumably local production, you know, farmers and things, through civil society, through government and regulatory bodies, and then into the international aid community as well. And I guess the thing that sort of connects to this audience is a little bit, there must be integrity and transparency challenges right through that value chain. And be really interested, Roy and Alapati, just to sort of understand how you try and influence, you know, the integrity of the system and the transparency of the system for the people involved in it, as you go about your work. You know, what are the tools you use? How does PACER Plus really make a difference in that space? And perhaps, first of all, what are the risks that you see in that space?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, I think one of the things which is always a challenge, and given we're a regional secretariat, is how crowded the space is. You know, the Pacific region is really, really crowded, and there's so many donors and other big players in the region that does make it a bit of a challenge for us as a regional secretariat to stay coordinated and to work with other agencies or donors to try and ensure that what we're doing is fit for purpose, and also that it doesn't impact on the national architecture or the national ecosystem, you know, because the resources in our region is very, very limited. And so anything that we can do to try and avoid duplication, but also having an impact on the resourcing in the region, we like to try and work together with some of these donor agencies or these other regional organizations in the region to be able to support not only just the regional architecture, but also at a national level. And I think some of the ways that we do look to provide probably support, not so much influence, because we like to be a neutral secretariat. They like to influence people. It's like influence has some different meanings to it, but we like to say support or assist. And some of those ways is actually doing some of these webinars, you know, running some of these webinars to provide awareness of what we're doing, participate with other regional bodies and collaborate with them on activities. As Pate mentioned, you know, there's so much going on in terms of the value chain, and we do try and collaborate with other regional bodies or regional organizations or donors to try and support some of what's needed in the system. But I suppose some of the work that we do, especially some of the regulatory work that we do, that supports the enabling environment, contributes to the integrity of those ecosystems, and especially those national systems and regional areas as well. And so I think that's a lot of the work that we've been doing in terms of trying to create that enabling environment. And as Pate mentioned, some of that automation will support some of that. You know, that's limits the mistakes that can be made through automation. And so that's some of the areas that we do support parties on under PACER Plus to help them. And I think Pate mentioned the trade portal, which is under PACER Plus. There are a number of obligations that countries have to meet as part of their schedules of commitments that they've negotiated amongst themselves. And all that information needs to go on this trade portal. And it clearly articulates what needs to be presented, what information needs to be known, not just for other PACER Plus countries, but also ministries and, of course, private sector. Because private sector needs to know what government's doing. And so they need to have a place where that information is contained and it's almost like the single source of truth in relation to, as Pati mentioned, any tariffs or any duties. How do I get licensing for certain countries? How do I do specific things, and what are some of the processes around that? So, I mean, those are just some areas off the top of my mind, John.
That's really interesting. I think that when you look at that value chain and your involvement right across it, and the complexity of trade and just peacetime, let alone in a Pacific that's got, you know, multiple players and multiple different challenges in it, if you like. You know, one of the things that springs to mind is people trying to get through the system other than through normal channels, you know, trying to shortcut things, or you know, where there's money, there's often people wanting to sort of take a bigger cut, or not being, you know, the integrity of the system might wobble around corrupt practices or whatever it might be. You know, it's not unique to the Pacific at all, but, you know, it is a real risk in the Pacific. What's your sort of take on that from a sort of semi-regulatory body, in terms of what's your sort of risk areas, you think, in that model, and how do you go about sort of influencing improvements to those?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that we do is driven by the countries that we serve. And so a lot of that is around looking at some of the enabling environments, some of the enabling factor. And, you know, some of it is capacity building for the people that are in some of these regulatory positions, and undertaking assessments or audits on various systems within their remit. So us doing some of those capacity building and trainings and workshops, and helping these some of the countries develop these new policies, these new frameworks, these guidelines, to ensure that there is a process and system in place to help them if things do occur that there are integrity issues involved with it. So there is a lot of capacity building, and that helps reduce some of the risks for parties. We bring in experts from various networks, whether they're from Australia or New Zealand or other parts of the world, to come in and have a talk to countries around some of the risk in terms of their regulatory frameworks, or some of the policy settings that they may have that might not be fit for purpose. Things around utilizing the technology and automation to support in reducing some of the risks that could occur. I think those are just some of the areas that we do look at and work on with a number of our countries. But then also, I think these sort of webinars that PASAI and Office of the Auditor-General in New Zealand are running. And then there's other regional organizations that are doing similar work, like the Pacific Island Law Officers Network, PILON. They do quite a bit around the fraud, integrity, cybercrime. So I think for us, sometimes it's just coordinating some of the things that are happening in the region as well, and providing those to as many networks as we can, to give them an idea of actually what's happening out there, but also how to support some of these at a national level.
Yeah, I look, the really interesting observations there. I think, Alapati, you talked about one of the roles is developing effective cooperation mechanisms, and certainly one of the challenges for everyone in regulatory roles or in integrity roles like auditors and ombudsmen is that kind of knowing that you're not alone, that there's other people that will assist, that connect, that have the same overall goals. But how do you align activities? How do you work together on that? So I think that's a real challenge for everyone, and maybe that you can have some observations on that. As well as, I guess it prompted another question from me, which was often, and this is taking it more to an Auditor-General kind of lens, but there's often regulatory settings inside countries which hamper to some extent the roles that independent players like Ombudsman, Auditors-General, etc. can play. And you talked about thinking about your value chain and where you could build capacity and capability. Talking about perhaps working with governments, how do you go about kind of influencing them to perhaps change regulatory settings which make the system, you know, more amenable to high integrity trade? You know, it's a big challenge for everyone in the Pacific, you know, to ensure the governments understand the challenges and put things in place to help build robust systems. But obviously, there's a big incentive on governments to build trade and build economic well-being for the people of the Pacific. Are they more motivated to the kind of messages you send them in terms of improving regulatory environments? How do you go about that? Do you work with development agencies, other development agencies to influence government settings? You know, what's your kind of model when you think, gosh, this government could do a bit more to help strengthen the system? How do you go about sort of progressing that?
Maybe I'll just kick off, and Batsy, if you've got anything to add, but I think it's really just around, the good thing is when we do develop activities for implementation, countries do self-identify areas or, you know, weak points that they need to improve on. And a lot of the work that Batsy does is around standards, you know, and those sort of things. And a lot of countries do identify some of these areas, whether it's legislation or legislative reviews. So we get asked about reviewing the investment type legislation, or reviewing customs legislation, or biosecurity, reviewing policy. So I think a lot of countries that we've dealt with, and also some of the agencies that we have worked with, you know, whether it's the UN or World Bank or ADB, you know, all the three-letter acronyms that we have in the region at the moment. You know, PASAI is good. You've got more than 3, so it's really good. And Pilon also good as well. I've got more than 3.
That's inflation.
Yeah, yeah. But I think a lot of countries are aware of their areas that need more strengthening. And so they tend to come to us or other agencies or other organizations to try and help them with this. And this is where we utilize some of our expertise, you know, our networks, to be able to support those sort of things. So I think what we've faced and encountered is a lot of countries do self-identify the areas that are at risk for them, areas where they need more development, and they're aware of some shortfalls. And so that's where we tend to build our activities upon, to be able to address some of those issues that they face. But just one more thing before I hand it over to Pate is, we can't solve everything. We are probably only part of a bigger piece in terms of the ecosystem at a national level, or whatever the frameworks are at a national level. So we might review the legislation, but the countries may ask others to draft the new or make the amendments. Sometimes we can do the review, the drafting, and all those sort of things, but then there could be other agencies or other donors that will come in and do some of those pieces of work. But I think it's just important for us to probably coordinate with some of those donors and those agencies. And so I think that's just probably just some thoughts on that. But
before I hand it over, I just, maybe a question of, when you do look to influence a government, do you sort of go in at the political level with support from MFAT and DFAT, or do you work in through, you know, the bureaucracy of a country? How do you sort of bring those things to people's attention, and who do you ask to support you in that conversation?
Usually it's just the senior officials from those countries or those ministries. So
Right.
as Pate was talking about, there's a lot of ministries that we do work with, whereas biosecurity, customs, standards bodies, you know, private sector. So we tend to work with those senior officials. And one of the things under PACER Plus, which is one of the obligations under the actual treaty agreement, is there is a requirement for those parties that have ratified the agreement to respond to queries from each other in relation to issues, which Pate might be able to elaborate a bit more on. But yeah, that is one of the requirements under the actual agreement. If there's any contentious issues amongst, whether it's trade or biosecurity or tariffs or financial issues or tax and things like that, there's a mechanism in the actual treaty agreement that obligates parties to respond to queries. from other parties. So, you know, we tend to work with those ministries and those senior officials from those ministries who then work with their ministers, you know, because we got to ensure that we are neutral as well. So we provide the support that they might need. But yeah, maybe Pati had anything else for it?
Most Auditors General would give their right arm for a requirement for a government to respond. So I'm not sure we can copy that and send it around the Pacific. That'd be great.
Just to add on to the remarks for Roy, the way we work with the governments, we start off by raising a lot of awareness, not only on the government obligations under PACER Plus. PACER Plus is closely linked to all the various international trade agreements like the World Trade Organization and like IPPC, Codex, the animal health, WHO issues. So all these are already government obligations that must be met. So we start off with the awareness going right from the top at all different various government agencies, and of course always keeping the private sector informed. Once they get that understanding and they know the importance of automating their processes, getting everything out there so it's transparent, there's no surprises in terms of legislation changes, giving opportunities to other members to make comments on any changes or measures that they are planning to make. So the information flows. So that's the whole purpose of a lot of these awareness measures that we've been taking to get the countries to be aware of why they are doing it. They know the relevance of it, especially with the systems like the Asikuda Well and the e-FITO work for biosecurity, so that everything makes it easier for them, cuts costs. But once they understand the importance and the benefit of having it, there's no more need to influence them, but they just do it on their own. And of course, with support from our experts, once they validate any new findings, countries are very willing to just go with it based on those reports and those findings. Even the challenges with the systems, a lot of these systems rely on the internet connection. Some of the countries are still working on these local issues in terms of infrastructure, but they're getting there. So these are just some of the, I would say, not risks, but challenges that countries face at the national level with the internet connection. But we noticed that there's a lot of other work from other donors as well, getting what you call the fiber optic and also the satellite links from Starlink. So gets countries like Kiribati and Tuvalu and so forth. They get better internet connection to these systems. Maybe I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think all of that sounds pretty powerful, actually, in terms of getting government support, because obviously trade is very important to every country, and having sort of awareness seems to be the key enabler of change. What about when it gets a bit sticky, and perhaps thinking more about the roles of civil society? You've talked about them as being a key part of the value chain for PACER Plus, and I think in terms of Auditors Generals and Ombudsman and others, civil society can be a really strong lever for change in a country, that they support the sort of findings of their work, etc. In terms of how you build relationships with civil society and the connections that you see as important for your role, how do you go about that, and what are the key things that civil society can do to help you?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, so similar to what Pate mentioned, we do awareness with some of the civil societies and the NGOs in countries that want to know about PACER Plus and how to ensure that some of that work that we do under trade agreements also support communities as well, because we do a lot of work in the communities as well, not just with the public sector, but some of the work, as Pate mentioned, We do work with some of the women in business as part of our gender equality, disability and social inclusion action plan that we do have as part of the work that we do. So there is a bit of awareness for the communities as well. And some of the other ways that we do that is we translate some of the materials that we have into the local languages, just to give them a bit more understanding in their own language, not in English, but in the local languages, to ensure that they can pass on the information more easily and they can access it easily, and it's not in English. So that is some of the work that we do. And we do get a lot of questions from the civil societies around ensuring that, you know, gender inclusion and, you know, social inclusion are important parts of some of the elements that we do implement and some of those activities, even around any sort of regulatory frameworks or guidelines that we do implement. That sort of things that civil societies tend to discuss with us, and we have a discussion with them. But also trying to give them the material that they need to be able to have those discussions with their own communities and in their own local setting. So that's part of all that awareness building that PACER mentioned before.
And just in terms of the importance of civil societies, the work you do, is that about activating the sort of interest in the country for exports or for working in this new frameworks? What is the purpose that you're trying to get civil society to support you in?
So the work with civil society is just building the awareness in their communities. We all know the Pacific is quite we're all spread out on different islands, so there's no way, you know, our organization can reach everyone. So is utilizing the civil societies to spread the message, the community groups, the women in business groups, the local churches and all those sort of things to, you know, provide information on what's happening and what things have changed that might have an impact on the various communities. So it's all those sort of things, trying to help them understand what PACER Plus is all about and what we can do and what we can't do, and how we fit into a national architecture in terms of areas that we can provide support in.
Look, I think that's a challenge even for people here, and for me, you know, my role, you know, is sometimes very confusing as to how it fits into the overall architecture. Talking about the many players, you did mention before, you know, a large number of development agencies, donors, people of interest in the Pacific, and they've all got some connection to the work you do. How do you manage that? How do you sort of think about that landscape and at least to the extent you can, coordinate your activities with theirs?
Yeah, that's where we do share our work programs, our annual plans with some of those core agencies or other regional bodies that are operating in our region. And, you know, having the good old talanoa and catch up with people, similar to what we do. Every time I visit Wellington, I always email Sarah to come and see what's going on with PASAI and, you know, catch up. And it's sort of a lot of, you know, face-to-face meetings or virtual meetings, coordinating. And I think having these subcommittees like PACER mentioned, and the various committees where some of these dialogues can take place, also helps with some of that coordination. And similarly, if I think about the labour mobility spaces, we have the specific labour annual meeting, labour mobility annual meeting, which was in Vanuatu last year in 2023, which saw about maybe over 400 participants converge on Vanuatu, and there was all sorts of interested people coming, you know, not just the employers, the employees, the academics, the researchers, the workers themselves, the unions, big international organizations like ILO, International Labour Organization, International Organization for Migration, ADB, World Bank. So just even that on its own, labour mobility on its own, already highlights there's so many interested people or parties in the region. And that's just one aspect of some of the work that we do. So having the interface or having those sort of groupings to be able to provide advisory support. So we work quite closely with ILO and IOM, Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, to do work around labour mobility, but also we also work closely with Australia and New Zealand with some of their programs that they do run. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just a little bit of a idea of how crowded it is, and that's just labour mobility on its own, and let alone what Pate just mentioned. If you look at those components that we do manage, there's 6 or 7, and under those 6 or 7 components, we can have close to 100 people involved in that space.
Yeah, I think when you list it like that, just for one element, it shows you how hard it is to have impact across multiple agencies with the things that you're most interested in. There's always a challenge to get your points on their agenda if they need to. But actually some pretty helpful hints there, I think, about sharing plans, face-to-face meetings, spending a lot of time networking, and also leveraging off those big Pacific meetings where a lot of stakeholders come together and you've got the chance to sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, or whatever the saying is, cover off a lot of issues at once. One thought that sort of, if you're thinking about the role of Ombudsman, Auditors General, perhaps Judiciary and others, in terms of your world, how do you see those two connecting from your point of view, or those kind of integrity agencies working with someone like you, working on trade across the system, and what do you see are the sort of common lessons that could fall for both them and you in that kind of environment? Obviously everyone's concerned about corruption or concerned about, efficiency of the public sector. What sort of things are you seeing from a PACER Plus angle on that?
I think for us, it's mainly around the policies, legislation, and the frameworks that are in place. Those tend to be the main areas that I think would cross over with the work that the Auditor Generals do and Ombudsman, especially also not just that, but also the Attorney General's office when we're supporting the drafting of new legislation. It's also looking at whether it's robust enough to be able to cope with any changes in the future, or the operating environment that the agency might be working within, and how it fits in with some of their international obligations, as Pate mentioned, whether it's World Trade Organization or World Customs or, International Labour Organization. So it's really just, if I think about how it crosses over, that it's those sort of areas, it's the policies, it's the frameworks. But then I think the other area that we always see a lot on is that we see probably a gap is when new legislation is passed or new policy is passed, whether that awareness filters down to the people that need to know, especially the users of that policy or the users of the framework or the legislation. And sometimes it could be private sector, it could be other ministries. So yeah, that's always one of the things that we do tend to see, where there's been changes in the regulatory environment, but there's not much awareness in relation to that. And so that's something that we try to do under PACER Plus, if we're supporting any countries with implementing new frameworks or new standards or new legislation. Part of the support that we do provide is the awareness on it, the consultation. So taking it from the mainland out to the outer islands and the communities out there, so that they can understand what changes have occurred and why it's happened, but also to get that consultation from the people that will likely use it, or the people that will have an impact on, which is sometimes our communities. So yeah, those are just some of the areas that will probably cross over with some of the work that the Ombudsman and Auditor General's offices would usually do.
Yeah, well, I think the promulgation of rule changes, etc., I think is a common issue, but when you describe the challenge in the Pacific, it's another level of change and challenge, right? And we'll come to the questions from the audience shortly, but I just wondered whether you had any sort of case studies or examples that you wanted to talk through in terms of the work you do and how it's made a difference in the Pacific. I mean, we've talked generally about your engagement model, your value chain, and where you add particular emphasis on that. But, you know, for the people on the call here, are there some examples you could share of particularly successful work that you've done and maybe how that's improved outcomes for people in the Pacific? Transparency and integrity obviously lens from this audience, but more broadly.
Yeah, I think what Alipati mentioned before was around the automation
Right.
of some of the systems, especially the customs system. That automation is, you know, we've gone from, for some countries, from 2 or 3 weeks of clearing goods to a matter of half an hour to less than that. And using the automated system to be able to clear entries or clear goods or facilitate trade quicker, that all helps. And I think if I think about the role that the Auditor-Generals do, you know, having an automated system will probably also help them with their auditing as well, because it's easier to find the records. The system actually stores the records. The system will also tell the auditor if someone has tried to change the records. And usually that's really hard when you've got probably a paper-based system where they will be hard to probably maintain those records or find those records, or you probably have to go down to the ground basement floor and try to find the records room and open up and see where if those records still exist. And I think so. It's probably automation is probably one of the big ones that we've seen in terms of some of the improvements to support countries in terms of some of those systems. But then also some of the work that Alepate does around standards, developing standards for not just goods, but developing standards for various frameworks like construction or, you know, that will help countries with if should any accidents or things happen, at least there's a code that you can go to and check and, you know, and make an assessment against. So, and maybe I think that's probably some areas that have been that we've seen in terms of support for countries. And you know, because 2022 amongst the PACER Plus countries, there's probably only maybe 4 countries that had an automated customs system. And so by the end of last year, we got another 6 or 7 countries on board to automate their customs system. It was a lot of work. We work closely with the UN trade organization on that, as well as various other like World Bank and other donor parties in Australia and New Zealand. But I think that's a pretty good example, and in line with some of the work that auditors and ombudsmen will probably do in countries, is utilizing an automated system to track and view and audit records. So yeah, that's just sort of a bit of an example.
I think that's an excellent example. You know, it not only guards against corruption at some level, because, you know, things get pushed through quickly. There's not a need to sort of facilitate projects through. But I think your point about traceability, transparency and record keeping are really important as well for integrity in the system. It's not just the Pacific. My first job as an auditor was sitting in the top of a petrol station looking at Visa card receipts. So, you know, it's not just Pacific nations that struggle with paperwork sometimes. But no, that's a really good example. And I think often it's getting those basics right that actually ombudsmen and auditors general focus in on, because of the importance of just having integrity to the basic systems. We've got a few questions coming in now, and I think Sarah's got one live here, but Shauna or someone could read the questions, because I dare not touch my screen because something will go terribly wrong. So
shall I do my one?
Sarah can send her question in. Yep.
Just listening to what you shared, Roy, I was wondering in terms of countries self-identifying to use the, you know, what the support that you can provide to them. Do you know or have any kind of sense whether governments or any government ministries that have asked for help might have done that because an auditor, a Supreme Audit Institution or another independent agency has audited or reviewed them and pointed out weaknesses, and then that's flowed through to them asking for support to remedy that weakness?
Yeah, usually some of the requests that we do get come with a report that someone has conducted an assessment, some sort of assessment, whether it's the World Bank or a national level auditor or an independent person that's come in and made an assessment. And usually that report shows us that these are the areas that needs to be improved, and this is the support we'll need from an organization like PACER Plus, and we're going to have to talk to New Zealand about this, or Australia, or World Bank, or other donors to help us with that. So yeah, usually when we're asked to support parties with implementation of especially regulatory frameworks, amendment or reviews of legislation, it's come from an audit or some sort of assessment has taken place, and someone has identified this as, you need to fix this to ensure that these things don't happen. And so that's where we do get some of the work, especially in that regulatory and compliance space.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I guess what that means for our audit colleagues that are here today, and as we work from a PASAI perspective, supporting auditors across the region, that we can encourage them as well, that if they're identifying system weaknesses through their audits, that a recommendation can be that they can suggest to the ministry or to the government that actually they seek support through PACER Plus to remedy something that the auditors have identified. So yeah, that's really useful for us to know, and I'm sure for the auditors to, often I guess the sense is that you're asking an agency to improve something that they don't know how to act on, but the more that we can point them to sources of support to be able to remedy those issues, then that's the way we should all be working together to improve the system.
Yeah, good.
It's really helpful. I have got a question from Vanessa Mamu, and her question is, does the PACER Plus implementation unit produce assessments or evaluations of the impact of PACER Plus in terms of the economic value of trade and mobility among its members? Nice, easy question.
Yeah. No, it's that's a really good question. So what we have in place is a monitoring, evaluation, learning and adaptation framework that is utilized to measure the progress of countries, parties, not just at a national level, but at a regional level, in terms of how PACER Plus has been utilized. PACER Plus is fairly new, so it will take some time, but we do have outputs, the short-term outcomes, medium-term, long-term outcomes that we do look to support countries to help them progress along that continuum. And so some of the work that we do is capture some of those stats. And I think that's some of the challenges that countries do face in the region, is being able to capture the data, to be able to use the data to actually confirm, or as the question asked was around the progress and how we can support getting that information. And so because PACER Plus is fairly new, that's some of the work that we're currently doing at the moment, is how do we capture that information. So if I just go back to that example of automation, right, that's one example. We automated Tuvalu system, it's a custom system, and probably within a month of automating the system, they had an increase in revenue of about 6%. You know, and so that's quite a good result for them, and they've been slowly increasing their revenue. And I think that's just because automating it has made it easier for the private sector. They don't have to go down to the office to stand in line. You know, they can now clear their entry on their laptops or their phones. And so I think some of those examples do provide, you know, enough to show that there is some value that's been happening. Some of the other work, I think Pate mentioned equipment, and we might think of equipment as these big industrial equipments, but some of our farmers are looking at things like harvest bins, you know, and when they're transporting from the outer island, one of the countries reported crop damage after harvest sitting at about 60-70%, just because they use the sacks and they chuck into the back of the boat and then it gets transported from the outer island. But providing those sort of equipment to farmers has reduced that right down, you know, and some of the reports that were received in terms of post-harvest damage is now down to 20%. So it's gone from like 60 down to 20. So which means they're going to make more money because they're able to get more of their produce to market, rather than having to cope with the damage, because once it comes out of the back of the boat that it's come from the outer islands, there's less damage to the products. And probably something that Alipate mentioned was the tariffs. So for businesses in the Pacific, if I think about your entry of goods into Australia and New Zealand have zeroed the tariffs on products from PACER Plus countries into Australia and New Zealand, which means that reduces the costs for businesses in the Pacific. They don't have to pay the tariffs in Australia and New Zealand, which could be up to 5, 6, 7%, which is quite a lot of money for our businesses in the region. So, you know, those are probably just some of the examples in terms of perhaps some of the economic benefits. But I think time will tell how the impact of those benefits, you know, as we start to continue to implement, given we're only into our 3rd year of implementation.
Okay. That was a good question. I'm not sure if there's other questions on the chat. It's slightly beyond me to check the chat. I'm sorry. I think there's a chance to play a short video. Is that still an option? Which actually flows nicely from Sarah's question, which is around you know, the impact on people, really. So if Angela or Shauna could put that up, I think it'd be great for us just to have a quick look at that and then come to a conclusion.
The Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations Plus, or PACER Plus, is a unique trade agreement that is focused on creating an enabling environment to raise the living standards, create jobs, and increase the ease of doing business, while also lowering barriers to trade. It's been 3 years since PACER Plus came into force on 13 December 2020, and it certainly hasn't been smooth sailing. The implementation unit, set up in July 2021, faced significant challenges during a tough period in the region's history. And yet, despite these challenges, PACER Plus parties united and overcame obstacles to create an enabling environment for trade. Over the past 3 years, we've worked together to implement solutions to make trade easier and more efficient across our region. This is our shared achievement. Together, we've achieved much more. PACER Plus has assisted parties in implementing the agreement through the Development and Economic Cooperation Work Program. Nearly 3 years since its establishment, it is good to reflect on what we have all achieved. PACER Plus supported Pacific parties in adopting Assecutor World, a customs management system which significantly benefited Pacific countries, resulting in the increase in government revenue. Pacific countries faced biosecurity challenges with error-prone, costly paper-based phytosanitary certificates. PACER Plus introduced electronic phytosanitary certificates, or ePhyto, streamlining the certification process, reducing errors and lowering costs for importers, exporters, and authorities. Under the technical barriers to trade component of the agreement, PACER Plus addresses regulations and standards that might make it difficult for PACER Plus parties to trade with each other and the world. This includes things like different rules for product safety, labeling, or packaging. Several Pacific businesses have benefited from PACER Plus in this space. Please meet Votausi Mackenzie Reur of Lapita in Vanuatu, another business that benefited from PACER Plus.
Our journey with Lapita Cafe to be able to obtain its HACCP certification was a long one. It was since 2021, so it's a long time. But we were really thankful to PACER Plus because they came in and were able to fund our HACCP certification. And that was done in 2023. So we're really grateful to PACER Plus for their assistance in that area. And the HACCP was largely for the process of our manual plow in our HACCP certified factory in Santo. So I'm truly grateful for that. Thank you.
Meet Diana Yates, founder of Cathlero Commodities Development in Solomon Islands, a woman-led cocoa processing and exporting company and the only licensed exporter for cocoa from the Solomon Islands to Australia and New Zealand.
Support from PACER Plus, we were able to develop capacity building for our staff. We have been very fortunate to have had 2 sets of training. One was done online for our staff, and then the other one was on a person-to-person training where our staff actually went over to Australia. That actually had improved a lot with our capacity building for our staff. So far, in comparison to before we have had that training, I think the production level at the moment is quite good. Yeah, they were able to develop products like our fruity bar. We hope to be able to develop the nutty bar as well, and these are all thanks to PACER Plus.
PACER Plus strengthening its support of the private sector opens up new opportunities, expanding businesses' customer base and driving economic growth across various sectors, ultimately benefiting Pacific countries. In the last financial year alone, PACER Plus assisted 179 Pacific businesses, many of whom are women-led, and will continue to support more.
I'd like to thank PACER Plus as businesses in Niue and in the Pacific are experiencing new possibilities for growth and success. The agreement's emphasis on trade and services and investment are especially beneficial for small island nations like Niue. Including private sector, PACER Plus acknowledges and also understands the crucial contribution that businesses provide into economic progress. This inclusive strategy enables Niue and the Pacific to capitalize on strengths in services and investment, and therefore explore fresh and new opportunities for trade.
The inaugural PACER Plus Regional Investment Promotion Toolkit Workshop, rolled out in April 2024, helped strengthen and build Pacific countries' capacity in attracting and retaining investments, foster peer-to-peer learning, and collective effort in achieving results in the region.
So many things we have learned in terms of what we can offer more in terms of services provided to help foreign investors. First of all, to attract investors to come into Samoa, and also to help them in terms of aftercare services.
We learned a lot from our other countries, other neighboring countries, as well as our facilitators on what we can do to promote investors in investment in Tonga, so they will be able to bring in investors into the country. As at the moment, we do not have a promotional side of investment into the country, so this is a very, very important training that we were able to take part in.
And finally, the arrangement on labor mobility under PACER Plus has brought significant benefits to both labor-sending and labor-receiving countries in the region. It has provided opportunities for Pacific people to gain employment and valuable skills abroad, while Australia and New Zealand gained access to a workforce filling essential roles, addressing labor shortages and driving productivity. This arrangement was mutually beneficial for both Pacific employees and employers in Australia and New Zealand. In November 2023, Vanuatu hosted the Pacific Labour Mobility Annual Meeting with nearly 400 attendees from government officials across the region, as well as labour mobility workers, recognized seasonal employer and Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Schemes employers, industry representatives, trade unions, private sector, academia, civil society, and representatives from regional and international organizations. Many issues were raised by both employees and employers at PLAM. PLAM remains the ideal platform for discussing and addressing labor mobility concerns in the region. It's a crucial forum where all parties can come together, share their experiences, and find solutions to improve labor mobility for everyone involved. That's a lot to report on how PACER Plus is creating an enabling environment for trade in the Pacific. But we've barely scratched the surface of what we've achieved together. There is so much more to cover, and that is why we look forward to the upcoming 18 months to continue to deliver on what parties want. What PACER Plus looks like beyond 2025 will be up to parties to decide. For more information, please visit us at pacerplus.org.
That's a great video, very inspiring, and lots of really productive examples there of what's been achieved. So you should be extremely proud of that, Roy and our party. We have one comment, I think, or a question, and then we might move to wrap up. But maybe Sarah might be able to read that or help us with that.
Yeah, so I have been asked by Sala Kome no, I probably have done that very badly. I apologize for that. Just who would like to make a comment about his work as a trade, in trade and export in Pacific and work with PACER Plus. So just give you the floor for a couple of moments of comment.
Thank you very much. I guess we've heard now what PACER Plus has done in the Pacific. I'm one of the recipients of the assistance from PACER Plus. So I'm a founder and owner of Larcia Group Limited, where I've done facilitation of agriculture exports out of the Pacific, the Cook Islands, where we were able to amend the legislation to meet the New Zealand import health standards, where we worked with PACER Plus on that. Also harvest bins, worked with the Ministry of Biosecurity for the Cook Islands, just to facilitate their agriculture exports. Then again, reached out to the government of Samoa. We've been working together with PACER Plus to facilitate not only sustain jobs, but also the transparency of the work that's been involved with myself and Roy Langolong and his team. We were able to, last year, 2023, we were the first ones to send about 2,000 kilos of first tower air freight into New Zealand. And it was utilizing the harvest bins, increased productivity and longevity of the shelf life of the produce. Also in Vanuatu, before COVID, been working together with some of the Department of Industry in Vanuatu to facilitate their agriculture produce as well. Now, it's great to have the escuda. It's great to have all these processes and logistics, customs, and so forth out of the Pacific nations. But the big picture is when it arrives into New Zealand, that's where they get stuck. So in saying that, it just happens that I'm a customs broker. And so I launched the import entry, and I follow the tariffs and understand the duty exemption, as well as applying whatever concession under the tariffs. So that is one of the processes that is a little bit difficult on this end, where governments aren't aware of having to facilitate it through the end user. I myself, not only as the customs broker, but I'm also the buyer of these produce. So not only buying, but facilitating it to the Pacific Island network or distribution in New Zealand. And this is working alongside with PACER Plus, because PACER Plus will also advise who and where and what can be exported under different. In last year, October, November, before Cyclone Pam in Vanuatu, I facilitated a trade mission on behalf of the Department of Industry, and PACER Plus was there. Mike Lago was there. And so it's basically trying to find out ways to improvise and also to meet the commodity list of approved items into New Zealand. So things like labeling, packaging, traceability, as well as meeting the import health standards. So a lot has been said about what PACER Plus does, but I wanted to just come onto this platform and explain that it does work and it continues to work, provided that it's a government-to-government discussion for us little people to facilitate it through on behalf of the governments, but mainly the small agriculture farmer. So not only are we sustaining local jobs, but we're getting them to get into agriculture. We are remitting new money into the economy, and also we're providing sustainability. So if that works, it also allows this side of the country to send remittance, but not only that, enjoy the agriculture produce from the islands. So I just wanted to jump on here and just sort of acknowledge that again, with the work that PACER Plus does. Unfortunately, I didn't make the cut to be on their video, but yeah, I do appreciate the assistance, facilitation, and when funds are available, they will assist with the air freight and so forth, and just making that dialogue and that talanoa to who do the direct people, and especially with the airlines. So I just wanted to make a special comment on that, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Really positive comment, and it struck me there was a second video in the wind, Roy. So there's already a hand up there for a star player in that. But also just the way you described the complexity of the system and how, having someone to sit across that and help is incredibly important. So no matter where you are, import and export systems are complex. So really encouraging story. I think, Roy, just from me, before I hand back to Sarah, just thank you very much, and Ale Pāti. Lots of really good insight, very successful 3 years from what I can understand, and an awful lot achieved in that time. And I know how difficult sometimes making what seem like small steps happen, but you've made some really big steps happen in that time, and I think all of us appreciate the work you're doing and the support you give to all of us across the Pacific. I think also just the insights are not unique to you. The working with civil society, the way you've talked about working with development agencies and other partners around sharing plans, face-to-face meetings, leveraging international meetings. And then some of the things that Auditors General often get quite animated about, can you automate something? Can you make it simpler? Are there standards that you're working to? Are you applying those standards well? There's a lot of connection between the stories you tell and what you need to do business and what Auditors General should be interested in and how we should work. So complete gold from my point of view. Really appreciate the time today, and there's been a lot of interest in this seminar, and we really appreciate you and Ale Pāti, who I think has probably got on a plane in the seminar, but I think he's at Fiji Airport, but just taking the time to be with us today. So thank you very much. And I'll pass back to Sarah just to wrap up.
Just to add to John's comments, I think the discussion today has been very encouraging. It's great to learn more about your work, and I think particularly the focus on implementing systems and processes that are designed to improve integrity for people right across that value chain, across your system, from the small farmer producer to the complex export businesses. I guess that's the overarching theme of this webinar series, is looking at how we can improve integrity across the Pacific, and that everyone has a part to play in that. I liked also the comments that you made, which is something that we always bear in mind in our in PASAI's work around looking at supporting fairness, inclusion, and equity. And at the end of the day, that's what we're wanting to see through audit recommendations and changes to the system that's coming out of audit work. And it's great to see yet another part of the system that we're all part of that is also working for that as well. So not to draw things out, I guess I just finished by saying a huge thank you, Roy and your team, for joining us today. Please keep coming and catching up with us when you're in Wellington, because that's really valuable. And I think, improving the integrity system is about all of us keeping connected and looking at those ways that we can play our part, but not play our part in isolation, but work together to do that in harmony, so there isn't duplication and or clashing of what we're doing, but we can do it efficiently for the benefit of those that we're trying to serve. So thank you for the part that you're playing and for being with us today. And ka kite anō to everybody, and thank you for being with us, but please don't leave us yet. I will just ask Hannah now to close our session in prayer.
Thank you, Sarah. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakatahe ai, humie, huie, taikie. So in closing this session, we've now moved aside any restrictions. Our pathways are clear to return to everyday activities. Ka kite anō, everybody.